Good morning. Today I want to talk to you about the Christian practice of hospitality. It's one of the most important disciplines in our faith, and it's one that our EFM groups, that's Education for Ministry, in particular, have been reading about in recent weeks. The common understanding of hospitality is to invite family or friends into your home for a meal, and possibly to have them stay with you on occasion. It's often the case, though not always, that they will invite you in turn some other time. Just to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly normal and natural to do it. But Christian hospitality goes a great deal further. Jesus addresses that topic in a couple of places in Luke's Gospel. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you, he says? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. Later on, he says, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Now, I don't take that to mean that you shouldn't have friends round for dinner. I don't think Jesus means to be a party pooper. But that isn't really hospitality. It's fine in itself, but it's not what Jesus calls us to do when he asks us to show hospitality to others. Perhaps the most striking example of hospitality in the Bible is the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus tells this story in response to the question, "Who is my neighbour?" It shocked his hearers because the person who helped the man who had been beaten and robbed was an outsider, a Samaritan. He tended to the man's wounds and then took him to an inn to be cared for, paying whatever it would cost for the man to stay there until he recovered. The Samaritan had no expectation of being repaid. He did it out of compassion and love for a fellow human being in distress. Now, I realize this is a parable, so the events Jesus describes in it didn't actually occur. But it does illustrate the kind of extravagant love that Jesus wants us to show to others. When I say extravagant, I don't mean that it must always involve spending money. We can be welcoming and loving to those we meet without it having to cost us a penny. We can greet a new person at church, take part in the food pantry or chapter 2 ministries, visit someone who's lonely, or even just have a friendly smile for someone we come across. And if we are able to give money, there are a great many causes, both within the church and beyond, that we can donate to that will bring much appreciated help to those in need. To give one example, Episcopal Relief and Development is a charity administered by the Episcopal Church, and one of its current causes is providing help for the people of Ukraine. In EFM, we're introduced to the concept of the covenant of hospitality. This often applies to a relationship between people, for instance, within marriage. In any relationship, there can be either an economy of exchange or an economy of sacrifice. An economy of exchange means that I will do something for you if you do something for me. Quid pro quo, if you like. It can work to an extent if both parties keep up their end of the bargain, but it's liable to break down if one party begins to feel they are getting the short end of the deal. Worse still, if both believe they're giving more than they're getting, there's resentment on both sides. An economy of sacrifice is what Jesus illustrated and practiced in his life, and what he calls us to be open to. It means that we give willingly without demanding anything in return. So in a marriage, both parties act in love for the other, and there's no keeping score. Of course, human nature being what it is, sometimes one person exploits another, and that situation would eventually need to be addressed. But the difference between the two approaches is in giving love to the other simply because we love them, not in order to be repaid. Timothy Sedgwick, in The Christian Moral Life, states that no practice of hospitality is more central to the Christian life than forgiveness. We usually understand that to mean pardoning someone for an offence against us, or cancelling a debt. However, Sedgwick tells us that it actually means to restore a relationship. We let go of a claim against another person, whether it's material or emotional, and we do so without resentment. You've probably heard the quote, "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Ultimately, holding a grudge will do us harm, certainly emotionally and spiritually, and possibly even physically as well. The greatest act of hospitality and forgiveness is, of course, Jesus' death on the cross, which restores our broken relationship with God. Nothing could exemplify the economy of sacrifice better, and God asks nothing in return except for us to accept that sacrifice and love as God loves us.
Responded to by faith.